Welcome to Sometimes Love Isn't Enough, the Parenting Through Challenges podcast. I am your host, Angie Grant, generational healing specialist. Oh, excuse me. And today I want to talk about a comment that came up at a workshop that I was hosting last night. So last night I was hosting a local in-person workshop called Regulated Parenting. And my goal for the workshop was Well, there were multiple layers to it. One, I wanted participants to see that what our kids need today is different than what we needed when we were kids. Because on a much bigger scale than what's happening in our homes, our kids are changing energetically. And it's easy to blame it on tablets and social media and media. But here's what I think. I think that this big energetic shift is the catalyst that's putting tablets in our kids' hands. It's the catalyst that has created this go, go, go culture in our lives. It is this much bigger energy that has created or led to or fueled what we're experiencing in our lives today. And so it's easy to blame the things, the piece parts, but then we're not actually acknowledging what's underneath all of it. And so my first goal for this workshop was to help parents see that there's something happening with our kids that we know, we're aware of it. We see things falling apart for our kids at schools. We see how things are just weird when we take our kids to the doctors, even though the doctors are trying so hard. They're missing the mark. They're missing the piece that we know what's best for our kids and our family. And we see how influence, for example, in the medical system, that doctors are influenced by drug companies, by leadership, by things that have nothing to do with the well-being of our kids. But we see this in every single part of our life, unless you have your head in the sand. And I say that lovingly, but I don't watch the news. I avoid social media. My algorithm on my social media feed is pretty positive and showing me things that are aligned with what I search for. So I really am not seeing a ton of negativity, and yet I'm still highly aware of what's happening out in the world. And I know in my heart that it is because of this big energetic shift. So that was the first thing that I wanted participants to see. And then the next thing, the next kind of layer of my goal was to help participants see that our our regulation, our personal sense of well-being has a huge impact on our kids. It is a feedback loop between us and our kids. And when my kids were younger, this is not a perspective that I had. And part of that was because of this this current energy that we're moving out of, which has taught us to believe, to see that there's an outside authority that knows better than us and has taught us to not trust our intuition. When my son was younger and behaviors were so hard, and even when my daughter was younger and behaviors were hard but less hard, I thought that if I could just fix their behaviors, everything would be easier for me and them. But my goal was to fix the behavior problem, whatever I viewed that to be with both of my kids. And I know that I'm not alone in that thought process. And so, my second big goal for this workshop was to really help participants see that we have a much bigger role in handling our kids' behaviors that goes well beyond dissecting their behaviors. And in fact, it has nothing to do with our kids' behaviors. If we want to help them with their behaviors, we have to first start with us and regulating ourselves and releasing old stories and I think actually rewiring our brains to not be reactive to things that happened to us decades ago or before we even entered into this world. We now know through research that our nervous system is influenced, is um, the wiring in our nervous system starts its creation in the womb. And so when our mom had stressors in her life while we were in the womb, those stressors or those stress hormones had an impact on the way that our neurology developed. We know that there's no science to show that. And then fast forward, right? So, say, for example, your mom experienced stressors while you were in the womb, which influenced the way your nervous system developed. And then fast forward 35 years later, and you're a parent and your child is sassing at you, your reactivity is going to be higher unless you've done something to rewire what happened to you in the womb or when you were a young child or later on in life. Those neural pathways are strong in the same way that when we're trying to learn a new concept, for example, learning math, when we have that learning, we create a pathway, and that pathway stays there until we undo it or learn it in a different way or create a new pathway. I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know, I was listening to, I typically haven't for the past couple of years, I haven't been listening to music on my radio, but I've been listening to more like relaxation type music. But my music streaming service changed their plan. And so I don't have it anymore. And so I've been trying to figure out how to spend my time or what to listen to in the car when I don't always want to be listening to trainings and learning, right? Sometimes I just need to let my mind be creative. So anyway, so I was flipping through the radio stations thinking, well, maybe some music would be nice now. And I heard this song that I hadn't heard for, my gosh, probably 20 years, and I still knew every word to it because that is a neural pathway that's in my brain. The same way that when things come up in my life or maybe your life that remind you, much like that song, but remind you of a nervous system experience that you had earlier on in life. Perhaps there was something that happened to you when you were in elementary school that caused you to question your lovability or caused you to feel like you are not precious and you're not innately valuable, which isn't true, by the way, but something may have happened along your path that has created a neural pathway that when X happens, then your nervous system responds in a way that it goes into reaction mode. That's what our nervous system does, right? It when things in our story are triggered, and they can be seemingly little things. They can be things like your kids saying something like, I hate you, or I should just run away, or something even tamer that triggers in you just a smidge of questioning your lovability or your value. And in that moment, when our amygdala is triggered with a fear related to a human need, our nervous system goes into either fight, flight, or freeze mode. And I was sharing examples yesterday about, different ways that my nervous system responded to different triggers in my experience in being mom. But we're all the same. We're all wired the same. We all have a nervous system that has an experience and creates a pathway, and that pathway stays until it's broken or rewired to something different. That's what I love about EFT tapping. But my point being that this was the second layer that we talked about is that as long as we continue to parent with our neurology that has been influenced by stressors in our life or traumas in our life or experiences in our life that have caused us to question our value, question our lovability, feel disempowered, not be able to make good decisions, when there are things that have happened in our life as humans that have caused us to be off track, then we're more likely to be more reactive with our kids because there's something they say or something they do that triggers a fear in us, a fear that we're not good enough, or what will other people think, or a fear that that same behavior will just keep happening again and again and again until we take control. That is a fear-based response in our nervous system. And so it is up to us to decide, well, first having that awareness that nothing's gone wrong, you're being human. But once we have that awareness, we get to decide. We get to decide if we want to keep going down that same path over and over and over again, or if we want to be the ones to break the cycle. And I know sometimes that I hear from parents, why do I have to be the one that breaks the cycle? Why does it have to be me? And, I don't know that answer for you. I know for me, one, it's written in my chart. It is in my chart that I am here to see patterns and to break them. I'm here to see patterns that are no longer serving families, no longer serving humanity. And I find it to be my gift that I get to help people see them too and break them. And so I could take that part of my chart and see it as a burden. I could see it as a like, what the heck? Why do I have to have so many hard experiences in my life? Or I get to decide if I want to see it as a gift. And the same is true for you. Our perspective matters so much. So when thinking about that idea of why do I have to be the one that breaks the pattern? What if you shifted that thought to say, how exciting that I get to change this for myself, my kids, and future generations, whatever that might look like. How empowering is that to see that we have that power? Because we could totally choose to just chill on our couch and scroll social media and do nothing about it and play a victim to what's happening, what has happened through past generations, and what is happening in the energy right now. Or we get to change that. So that was the second layer that we talked about. And then the third was about seeing our kids for what they bring to the table, which I kind of just touched on. But each of us is so uniquely designed to bring such beautiful gifts to our families, to our relationships, to our communities, to humanity. And yet, as parents, we see our kids when we don't know their design, right? We see our kids and we love them and we think they're perfect and beautiful, and then they misbehave. And at some point along our parenting path, sometimes it's when our kids are really little, and sometimes it's when they get to be older. But at some point along our parenting path, our kids' behaviors drive us nuts. They trigger us, we become reactive, and then we're back in the same loop of blaming our kids for our misbehavior. We're blaming our kids and saying, you need to stop doing whatever so that I can stop yelling at you. But that is not how this works. And when we can see our kids through their energetic design and what they need, and see that perhaps what is driving us nuts isn't them misbehaving, but is them trying to fill an unmet energetic need. And what if we saw that in our kids and could parent them differently? What if we could see our kids through a lens that allows us to be curious about what they're doing instead of furious about what they're doing? This is that third layer that we talked about. And yet, still, there were questions, or I don't know, just wanting practical behavior management tools. And here was my answer for participants at this workshop and for you is the practical tool that I implore you to consider is that it has to start with us. I could give you, and have, in fact, in previous episodes, given really practical behavior management tools. But if you are in a reactive state or in a shutdown state, because that's what's happening also, right? I was saying that our nervous system responds in a couple of different ways when we're triggered. For some of us, sometimes our reaction is to shut down, is to be annoyed with our kids and let that fester in us as we scroll social media. Or for myself, when I went into flight mode My son's behaviors were triggering me, and I was feeling so overwhelmed and so frustrated that my go-to was to go take another course, take another class, get another certification, fill my mind with more information because I felt like that's what I needed to do to calm myself down, to better understand him. And then the behavior would happen, and I knew my mind was full of all kinds of information. I knew what to do, and I still kept reacting in the same way. I would shut down. There were some things that he did that caused me to have a reactive response. Not, I was never really a yeller, but my whole body would react in ways because of things that were happening in our relationship with his behaviors. There were things that were happening that were triggering me. Because I wasn't taking care of my nervous system, I wasn't actually talking to my nervous system in a language that it understood. I knew that I needed to stay calm in the moments, but me staying calm in the moments was actually me checking out, was me disengaging or disassociating in those moments because that's what felt safest to me. I didn't know where that middle ground was to be regulated and present and engaged with my son. And so in the moments, I remember somebody saying once that another adoptive parent, she said, I will become very stoic. And I thought, yes, that's it. I could be so calm and collected and yet so very disconnected and emotionless, which is the exact opposite of what my son needed. He didn't need me to be emotionally reactive, but he needed to feel that I still loved him, even though his behaviors were atrocious. He needed to feel that from me, and I put up this big brick wall. And so maybe that's not the way that it is for you. Maybe you're reactive, or maybe you are engaging with your kiddos. But my the biggest takeaway that I want you to take from this episode is that the practical parenting tool for us when we are reacting to our kids' behaviors, either by yelling or reacting or withdrawing and freezing or fleeing, that strategy, the most practical parenting strategy that I can offer to you today is to take care of yourself and regulate your nervous system and rewire those old parenting patterns. When we rewire the parenting patterns, then when our kids say those things like, I hate you, or I'm just going to run away, or for my son, it was, why don't you just find me a new foster family? Even though he never had one, that those words were so hard for me to hear, and they triggered in me questioning my own lovability and capability as a mom. And so I ran away inside. I retreated. So if your kids are triggering things in you because of the words they say, the actions they take, or the lack of actions, that was the big one last night, is my child just won't listen to me, and it makes me feel so incapable. It makes me feel shame as a parent when my child won't listen to me. That's a powerful statement for a parent to say, and that is the part that needs to be rewired. When we can rewire that thought that our child doesn't listen to us, and instead of it making us feel shame, when we can rewire that to have our child not listen to us, and that new wiring is, now I'm curious about what's going on here. I'm curious about how I can support them in following through, or I'm curious why that was triggering to me, right? When we can approach our kids' behaviors with curiosity because we've rewired our brain, that's when things change. It is not when we have yet another tool in our tool belt to handle behaviors. When we ourselves are disengaging or reacting or whatever your your fight or flight response looks like in your family, when you're still in that reactive mode and trying to use a tool, it just doesn't work so well. Or it stops the behavior temporarily, but it didn't actually get at what was underneath. It's kind of like putting a band-aid on a broken leg. And I'm not saying your kids are broken, but you get the idea, right? That when we're trying to address the behaviors at a superficial level, the underlying cause is still there and nothing really changed underneath. So this is my gift for you is to remind you the importance of regulating you, to invite you to schedule some tapping time with me. Or if you're not quite ready for that yet, check out my YouTube channel. There, every couple of days, I post a new episode that is all about using EFT tapping. I focus on the energy that we're experiencing, which shifts every few days. And occasionally I throw in a bonus tapping, like I did anxiety the other day because it kept coming up. But this podcast is for you, the parent who's ready to rewire and ready to do things different for your family. So until next time, yeah, just keep considering the idea that the first step in shifting your parenting dynamics with your kiddo, the first step in changing their behaviors is regulating yourself. So we'll chat soon.